transpires as a result. Now, in 2015, I went with Emma and a small group to visit Sarajevo and actually to see the Haggadah. And this is the view. I didn't realize at the time, 28th of June was literally 101 years later. This is the view from our hotel bedroom window. And if you turn right down this road, you get to the bridge. It's literally round the corner. They've got a plaque on the wall where the Archduke was shot. Now, Sarajevo in the 1990s, and for many of us, we remember when this was going on, was actually under siege for almost 4 years. The Serbian forces were round on the hills. Sarajevo is rather like a saucer, so it sits lower down, and the Serbian forces would shell down into Sarajevo. Terrible, terrible time. Over 11,000 people killed in the city. And this is called a Sarajevo Rose. It's actually a mortar shell explosion that they later filled the cracks with red resin, and they only put them where at least 3 people were killed. And there are around 200 of these roses around Sarajevo. Now, this is the National Library that the Archduke was on his way to see, a beautiful building built in 1888. And you can see, and this reminds me certainly of the 10th of May 33 and the book burnings that took place in every university town across Germany during the run-up to the Second World War. But the Serbians also burnt the library and a huge number of books. Luckily, the Sarajevo Haggadah was not there. It's in the museum. But here's a famous cellist of Sarajevo who used to, and this was actually the National Library, what it looked like before restoration. It had been shelled. And he would go out during the bombings and he would play his cello. You can see this on YouTube. Now, here's the National Museum. And at the time we were there, it was actually closed. You can see from this photo that I took. It remained open literally from when it was built. I mean,
it's 1 o'clock.
It started at 1850, but was built in 1888. And it was open the whole time, even during the Bosnian War. But it actually was closed for the period of 2012 to 15 because of the arguments to do with the funding. And it was only the Dayton Accords and Bill Clinton, if you remember at the time, that enabled it to open. Now, they built a special room in the museum. We actually got into the museum. We had to go around the back through the car park. It was completely closed. It was specially arranged for our group. And here you can see Emma next to Professor Shalom Sabar, who is an expert, international expert in art history, Jewish art history, Judaica. And here is the actual Sarajevo Haggadah. And this is a facsimile. There are a number of them. Next to him is Andrea, the curator. And in fact, in a conversation with Andrea, I wanted to help her with something. And I said, give me my email, your email. And she said, I can't afford the monthly cost of a service provider for email. She hadn't been paid, I think, for 2 years at this point. Behind them, there's Eliezer Papo, another academic from Ben Gurion University, remarkable man. And you can see this window with the Magen David. And if you look out the window, you're actually seeing the hotel and what was called Sniper Alley. This is the Holiday Inn and Sniper's Alley. And if you put Sniper's Alley into Google and look at YouTube, you'll see the locals used to have to run along this road, and you were lucky if you didn't get shot. And many, many people did. Now, here's the room that was built with fundings, some of it from actually the American Embassy, but from the United Nations mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this actually has a safe in it, but they store the Sarajevo Haggadah in different places. They want to keep people guessing. They're really scared that it's going to be stolen. And they have other objects in the room. This has now been refurbished. This is the later. I haven't seen this particular room. It's been refurbished. I prefer the old. I'm a traditionalist, but still, that's what it looks like if you go today. Now, Geraldine Brooks wrote a book, People of the Book, conjecture on what happened to the Sarajevo Haggadah, where it started, where it went. If you talk to academics about this book, they really don't like it because it is a novel. I think it's a wonderful book, and anybody who hasn't read it, it's certainly worth reading. And if you can read it with actually a facsimile next to you, it makes it even better. And you can see that she has the arrow beginning in Spain, which is correct. Tarragona, I don't know why she's put that in. That's more for the story. Going to Venice, which is correct, and we'll see. And Vienna is correct. And in Sarajevo here. And you've got Yad Vashem, and that's correct that that's here, and we'll see why. But this is basic, and the Ringstrasse in Venice, in Vienna, we'll see why that's there. But when we think of a Haggadah, generally we think of a document like this, and it's amazing. This is from the 11th century, and I'll start reading from the top. Kol hanisim ha'elu, v'hotzianu me'avdut l'chirut, u'mishe'abud l'gula, u'mi'yagon v'simcha, me'evel v'yom tov, u'me'efila l'or gadol, v'ne'emar lefanov, hallelujah, right? Hallelujah, Avdei Hashem, hallelujah, Shem Hashem, Yishem Hashem Vorach. You can go on. We know the words. This is 1,000 years, and yet all of us are able to read it without too much trouble. But there are no illuminations. There's no pictures in this Haggadah. Generally, it was thought for many, many years that if you look in Tanakh and Shemot, you shouldn't make a graven image, would be to the point.
Bye, thank you.
V'chol tmuna. Could I ask everyone to go on mute? Thank you. There's still people not on mute. Thank you. The idea that Jews didn't really want to have, or were not allowed under the terms of the Torah to have pictures. And this was a belief. Of course, others who argued against it said, no, this is only because of lo tishtachaveh, in case you come to worship these objects, and as we know, Roman idols and such like. But this all fell apart in the art world in the 1930s, when this synagogue in Dura Europos, Dura like endure or durable in English, it's a Fort Europos, Dura Europos, was found in Syria. And in fact, it dates from 244 CE. It was part of the shul was basically against the battlements. This is a talk all for itself. And they filled it in with sand to improve the battlements, because a battle was coming, and they knew, and that actually preserved this whole shul. It's in the National Museum in Damascus. I would love to go. It's on the -1 level. I've got the book out of Italy from Damascus, from the museum. And you can see these wonderful pictures, which showed even in 244 CE. So we're talking in that period with Mishnah and Gemara was going on. They were actually using pictures on the walls. And here's the ark, right, where they put the Sefer Torah. So they were davening towards these pictures, and they're all pictures of Tanakh. Now let's talk a little bit about the Iberian Peninsula, which is basically Spain, Portugal today. Well, in 711, the Muslims are going to come up from Africa, from Morocco and Algeria. They're going to come across Gibraltar, right? Jebel al-Tariq, the mountain of Tariq. They're going to come across into Spain. They're going to start pushing forward, and they're actually going to come into Europe, but 732 is going to end that. But generally, they're going to be taking over this whole area, these famous places, Seville and Granada and Cordoba. And there's the golden age in the year 1000, the golden age of Al-Andalus, which is actually to do with the word Vandals, probably. This is what the Arabs, the Muslims call this area, Al-Andalus. And they're going to have the Caliphate of Cordoba. And the word Caliphate, for those who haven't really thought about it too much, we use in Ivrit Machlif, right, the replacement. Well, after Muhammad, the prophet, goes, they have to have a Machlif. They have to have someone to replace him, and that will be the Caliph. And that's why there's this fight between different people and different sects to be the replacement. But at this stage, Cordoba is controlling Al-Andalus, and it's a fairly golden age until, of course, and you've got the convivencia, that basically the Muslims are okay with the Christians and the Jews doing their thing so long as they're subservient. Again, for another talk, but from the Jews' point of view, they're pretty much left alone compared to when they're under Christian rule and there are real problems. Interesting enough, in Granada, if you go to the Alhambra, which is certainly worth visiting and beautiful, there's this Court of the Lions and this beautiful fountain. And it's probably produced by a Jew, actually, who's thinking, of course, the Bet HaMikdash. And you think of the Sea of Shlomo, right? And you can see the animals, although here it's lions and not bulls. But this is the year 1000, this is Al-Andalus. And I've just picked out Aragon because we're going to see, and here's the coat of arms. You've already seen this in this presentation, but you probably didn't pick up, you'd seen it. And we'll see that again. And you've got Castile as well here, we'll see this. Now, the Reconquista, the reconquest, is basically the Christians fighting back. And there's a long series of wars and battles that go on, fighting for control. And ultimately, the Christians are going to push back the Muslims back into Africa. And the Sarajevo Haggadah is actually created, and again, there's a lot of academic work that's gone into this, in about 1350. We're not certain of the date, but that's as accurate as you're going to get. And it's created in this sort of area. And we'll see why in a sec. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to go so fast. In Aragon. So when we saw Geraldine Brooks over here, no, it's really from over here. So 1492, 31st of March. Today is the 31st of March. This is 528 years ago. There's the decree of Alhambra. And you've got King Ferdinand II of Aragon, we saw, and Queen Isabella of Castile. And here you've got Torquemada basically throwing his cross. There's the Jew asking for this decree, which is going to basically expel the Jews out of Spain. This was probably a deal that was done for the marriage, that Isabella, who's a very, very religious Catholic, made it a requirement to get the Jews to purify the kingdom and get the Jews out. Here's the Jew coming and asking on behalf of his community for mercy and even to pay a fine. And Torquemada throws down this crucifix, basically saying this would be, in Yiddish, a shanda, a terrible shame, to allow the Jews to stay. And this picture is actually in the Prado, which is closed at the moment. I looked at the website today. It says it's closed until the end of the crisis. So they just don't know where. And just to show a close-up of a bit of this, to see the power of this painting, which is a huge painting. I mean, it's 3 meters by 2 meters. It's a wonderful, wonderful painting on a terrible subject. And here's the Jewish leader of the community standing while Torquemada basically makes his point. And of course, as we know, the Jews were expelled out of Spain. Now, they weren't really allowed to take their wealth with them, but a book did slip out, and it's the Sarajevo Haggadah. And the Jews went everywhere. They're expelled out of Spain, and the Sephardic Jews go everywhere, but they tend to settle on near to the coast so that they can travel in ships and they can carry on trade, so that they can trade a lot. Some do go inland. And in fact, there's a classic case which Eliezer Papo made, which is, I think, a wonderful thought. He said, you know, the Sephardim are sea people and the Ashkenazim are river people, right? Ashkenazim come from the Rhine in Alsace-Lorraine. So when you live along a river, you build your house fronting onto the river. But if you live by the sea, you should build differently. So if you go to Saloniki, Thessalonica, which was a very Jewish city, the port was closed on Shabbat instead of a Sunday because a lot of the workers were Jewish. Before the Second World War, there were 55,000 Jews in Saloniki. After the Second World War, there are 2,000. But if you go to Saloniki, it's built to be a sea city so that when you get the onshore breeze and the offshore breeze, it travels up through the city and down. But if we go to Tel Aviv, you can see it's built by Ashkenazim, people who expect to live along a river, because they've basically blocked off that sea air. They built along the sea when they should have been building the other way. So it's a shame, but that's how it is when you allow Ashkenazim to build a city that should have been built by Sephardim. Now, how did the Haggadah come to the National Museum? Well, in Bosnia, in 1894, this is a Jewish family. By the way, you can see the fez. Now, most of the hats we wear, I've ever worn in my life, always have a rim. The European hats have a rim. How come the fez doesn't have a rim? Well, if you're bowing to the ground as part of your religion 5 times a day, it's useful for your forehead to be able to get to the ground without bumping against the rim. Hence, the fez doesn't have a rim. Well, in 1894, the Sephardi, the Cohen family, basically the father died, and one of the sons came to the religious school, the Malbar, and offered the Haggadah to his teacher, who couldn't afford it. But news of that reached the director of the National Museum. The museum was only finished in 1888, so they're looking to buy things. And they have a look at this manuscript, and they clearly decide, the director decides that it really is worth having. And he makes, frankly, a fairly derisory offer of 150 forints, $7,000 in today's money. It's a poor Cohen family. I mean, they knew in the family, the father and the grandfather used to treasure this Haggadah, used to love it, but they literally need food. So they're going to sell it for $7,000. To tell you that soon after, the Budapest Museum offers Sarajevo 50,000 forints for it. And then a few years later increases that to 500,000. That's what a bad deal. And in fact, the Haggadah is almost immediately sent to Vienna to these experts, Professor Schlosser, who's an art historian, and Professor Muller at the Imperial University, and David Kaufman, who's down here, who's a Jewish scholar. And in fact, he's the first one to use the term Jewish art in an article in 1878. He's very famous. There's a Kaufman Haggadah, not this one, a completely different one. And these three will publish after 4 years of academic investigation and really going into everything they possibly can to do with this Haggadah. They will publish a book, this is it, in 1898, a Spanish-Jewish handwritten, so manuscript, right, handwritten, of the Middle Ages, Professor Schlosser. And they take the Holach Ma'anya that I used as the opening picture from the Haggadah, and they have a facsimile, not with everything in there. They're using the printing they had at that time, which is colotype. And poor old Joseph Cohen, as he grows up, this is 10 years later, he writes this letter to the museum saying, our family really treasured this Haggadah. We realize how valuable it is, and we didn't take that much for it. Would you give us a copy of this facsimile and terms so we've got it to look at? They are not given a copy. They actually are allowed a few years later to buy at half price a copy. But again, you know, terrible the way they were treated. So the Haggadah is now the property of the Sarajevo, or the National Museum in Sarajevo, but it's been sent to Austria, to Vienna. And amazingly enough, after the book gets published, the academics in Vienna decide to return it, and they give it to the department who are meant to get it couriered back or sent back, and that department mislays it. They actually file it in a cupboard, literally put this extremely valuable, unique Haggadah in a cupboard, and that's where it sits. And after 19 years, about a year before that, the people in Sarajevo write back to Vienna and saying, can we have our Haggadah back? And they've lost it. They just don't know where it is. Unbelievable. But they find it. They send it back to Sarajevo by courier. Now, just to pick up a little bit, just to show you what a remarkable story this Haggadah has, before we actually get to look at the Haggadah itself, in 1941, in the Second World War, the Nazis are going to conquer the Balkans, and Sarajevo itself is going to be absorbed into Croatia, a Nazi puppet state, and Sarajevo's 8 synagogues are going to be sacked. And in 1942, so about a year later, this man, General Fortner, is going to visit the museum, and Dervish Korkut, who's the librarian, he speaks a bit of German, so he's going to translate with the director of the museum, and Johann Fortner says, give me the Haggadah, which at the time was in his briefcase, literally in the room where they're having this discussion with the director. And Dervish Korkut, who's already agreed with the director that he's going to spin them a line, says to Johann Fortner, unbelievably, he says, but your people have already taken it. So Johann Fortner demands to know exactly who took it. So Dervish Korkut said he was a German officer. I didn't dare ask his name. And of course, Johann Fortner is furious, but has no possibility now of getting the Haggadah. He obviously is going to try and find out who took it, but it's sort of gone, as it were. Now, Dervish Korkut is actually going to take the Haggadah to a Muslim imam and ask him to hide it. There are many, many stories. For everything that I'm telling you, there are 3 or 4 other stories. This is the Balkans for you. But I'm giving you what I believe to be the stories that academics now think are the most likely, if you read all the literature on this. For the people who've just joined, please, could you mute your microphone? Thank you. So here's Dervish Korkut, who arranges it for it to be hidden. And after the Second World War, the Imam takes it out, gives it back to him, and it's brought back to the library. He really is a tzaddik, Dervish Korkut. People didn't know this till much, much later. But during the war, they took in this orphan Jewish girl, Miri Papo, into their home. And they said that Miri was a Muslim and that she actually wore Muslim dress a lot of the time. Here's a picture from the war. They had a little baby and she was the nanny. And in fact, it's only much, much later. She survives the war and comes to Israel. And she petitions Yad Vashem to make Dervish Korkut one of the Chasidei Umat Ha'olam, which he is, the righteous Gentile. And in fact, he has passed away by the time he's made a righteous Gentile, but he and his wife, it's little known, by the way, that a righteous Gentile has a right of citizenship in Israel. And in fact, his wife, during the siege of Sarajevo, what goes around comes around, is saved by Miri Papo and brought to Israel. I know of one other case as well, and if you go to the Yad Vashem Museum, it's dealt with there, of a couple where a similar sort of thing happened. Now, we've got 20 minutes to go because I've spent over half of our time really with the history of the Haggadah, and you can see from the history that it's already become iconic purely because of the amazing things that have happened to it along the way. Now, the Haggadah itself, and I'm holding up at similar size, this is one of the latest facsimiles. Here it is, the actual one, and it's in 3 parts. There are 34 folios. Folio is a full page, 2-sided page, with illuminated miniatures. It's got 50 pages of Haggadah text, which are illuminated as well, and 52 folios of piyutim, liturgical texts. And the real fame of this Haggadah is because of the miniatures, the illuminated miniatures. Now, there are some inscriptions in the Haggadah that allowed academics to date it when they got it right. For example, there's an inscription, and unfortunately a later owner has obviously erased it because he didn't want it in there, but it basically says, I, and we don't know the name, admit how today, on 25th of August, with the Hebrew dating Ayin Resh, or Resh Ayin, 270, I sold this Haggadah to the honored, and the name's been scratched out, and I absolve him from any claim or appeal. I admit and confirm all that is written above, and that's been erased as well. But we know from the Ayin Resh, it should be written Resh Ayin, but this is something that's often done because Ra means bad, so they don't want to write Resh Ayin, so Ayin Resh. But to convert the dates, 270, Shivim Panim La Torah, Ayin is 70, Resh is 200. The conversion factor is 1240, which gives a date of 1510. And in fact, there's also a drawing in one of the pages of these 2 figures, and this was from the dress, and academics, again, who've looked at this, say this was added in the 15th century, and this could well be a wedding scene, because we can see similar scenes in other areas of art, and this may well be all to do with that, but this was in Italy, right? Now we know the Haggadah was in Italy because at the very end of the Haggadah, there's this inscription, which I put here, Revisto Parmigiano Giovanni Domenico Vistorini, 1609. He was a papal censor, and actually this gives the book protection, because once the papal censor had said the book's okay, no one's going to burn it or destroy it. So actually this was a good thing to have and protected it. And he was active in Venice. So we already know that the Haggadah, and we'll see later, was made in Aragon. And we know that it's come to Italy. We know it was in Venice. So we're already beginning to build up a picture. Now, here's the very first set of illustrations. And I'm going to quickly go through these because, again, each one of these illustrations, you can spend an awful lot of time because there is just so much in them. Now, you can see the illustrations, and they're only on one side of each folio. So the reverse of this will be blank and the reverse of this, which is an expensive thing to do. This parchment is expensive stuff. This book is not a cheap production at all. But you can see the creation, the 7 days of creation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Sorry, this is before, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? This is the Ruach Elokim Merachepet Al Hamayim. The spirit of Hashem is hovering on the waters. There's a young lady who I know who was here in Israel for a few years, Alexandra Bunker. She did her PhD on this Haggadah, and all about the use of gold and how to show Hashem's influence in the world with these rays of gold. Now, what's also interesting is you can follow from the text of a Tanakh, of a Torah in Bereshit, and you can see exactly what they're doing, and it's going to conform very well. But it's strange, on the Shabbat, on the 7th day, you've got this figure. Now, who is this figure? And again, everything is conjecture. Is this Hashem? Well, no, it seems to be a real person. Is it the person who commissioned the Haggadah? Possibly. And in fact, this figure, if you look at something like this, which is an altarpiece, a Christian altarpiece, and you can see this is a Jew from Catalonia. This is actually to do with host desecration. Again, another talk. And they're stabbing the host, the communion wafer. But you can see how he's dressed. And he's a Jew from Catalonia. So you can see it's the same sort of figure. Now, this is the next page along, where again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you read it this way, the Hebrew way. And again, whenever you look at these pictures and you're looking at the Tanakh, as we know, the Tanakh, and the rabbi has been dealing with this, our Rav has been dealing with this recently, the Tanakh is actually very sparse. And you often have to look for filling in the text, which is what the Perushim and the Midrashim especially do. And you'll find that all of these pictures, they actually show that whoever produced these drawings and created them, designed them, knew the Midrashim. They knew the Jewish Midrashim. We're just about certain, in fact, I think we are certain, that the person who did the drawings was Jewish. Now here you've got the creation of Chava, you've got the snake standing up, you've got them eating the fruit, but look at this, when they realize they're naked, and here the punishment, you've got the snake now is crawling along the ground, the Adam is having to till the soil, and again, very nicely done. I mean, we know the punishment for Eve is childbirth, but here you can see she's spinning, right? She's spinning, and that is the homemaker. And a homemaker is the one who gives birth as well. So it's a very elegant way of dealing with this. Here we've got the offerings of Cain and Abel, the killing of Abel, Noah building his ark. I'm really going to go through these quickly because I just want you to get a soupçon of what this is about. You can always get a facsimile and sit and look. There's so much to see. The flood, the Teva, the ark, Noah and the ark, the end of the flood. Noah's drunk. And again, the sun's going backwards to cover his nakedness, right? Think of the Midrashim to do with this. Tower of Babel, again, very building block and tackle from the Middle Ages. Sodom V'Amorah, there's the pillar of salt, right? Sodom's burning up. Obviously, this English is me having put this in, the annotations. Abraham with Yitzhak going to Har Moriah, the Akedah. Here you've got the Akedah, and is it Hashem's hand coming out of the cloud or the angel, right? Another way of showing Hashem's influence. Yitzhak and meeting Rebecca. Here you've got Rebecca giving birth. I've actually blown this one up. Here you can see the twins coming out, one slightly ahead, and she's got her socks and shoes on. Rather nice. And here you've got the older Esau and Yaakov. And here's Yaakov sitting and learning, and Esau actually out hunting. But of course, they're twins, they're two birds. This is an allusion to something else, which perhaps I won't go into at the moment. Here you've got the blessing, right? Well, Yitzhak goes for a blessing, and then Esau goes for a blessing. You've got Yaakov and the ladder to heaven, and the angels coming up and going down. Then him making an altar, anointing it. Joseph's dreams. Again, these are beautifully done. The original, just the color, the quality, the detail is absolutely wonderful. No reproduction can do the same as that. Joseph relating his dreams to his father, being cast into the pit. And here you've got slaughtering the goat to deceive Yaakov, to get the blood on the coat. Joseph being sold into slavery. Joseph and Potiphar, right? She's grabbing onto his coat. He's thrown into prison. You can see the, right? And these are the sorts of places that would be prisons in the Middle Ages. Joseph interpreting the dreams, Pharaoh's dreams. Joseph interpreting the dreams for Pharaoh. The grain stores. Joseph's brothers now bowing down to him, right? The Tzafnat Paner. Then Joseph seating his brothers in order, right? Joseph's cup found in the sack. Whoops. Jacob's funeral. Pharaoh Paro welcoming Joseph and his brothers back. I didn't have much choice, but they had to come back. And then Joseph dies and is buried in the Nile. And in fact, the Midrashim about his Aron being sunk in the Nile. Of course, the Nile, the river, is such a famous, important issue in Egypt. Everything to do with that. And then just the most clever segue from the book of Bereshit into Shemot by the Teva and Moshe. And here's Moses also floating on the Nile. A very, very clever segue. I'm only doing Bereshit. There are many more illustrations, but I want to look in the remaining 10 minutes or so in some of the full page illustrations. Here we see Moshe and the Luchot, right? The 10 Commandments. And you can see Moshe Elokim Matan Torah, right? So it's written in Hebrew, and this was done probably at a later date after production of the Haggadah originally. And this is fascinating, because we do not have very much from Spain. We don't know what things look like, but this is a Bet HaKnesset. Now, what are we seeing? This seems to be after the service because people are outside the door going home. Now, at one stage, special Cecil Roth, the historian, English historian at Oxford, thought maybe it's the blessing of the Kohanim. But they seem to be leaving, and there are women here as well. And this seems to be a woman inside. And in fact, cutting through all of the academic discussions, the latest belief is that this is a custom, which actually we see in our shul a little bit. You rarely see Ashkenazim going up to the parochet and kissing it and offering up a tefillah after tefillah has finished. But you often see some of our members who are Sephardim going up, and actually you've got these Islamic lamps as well. And this is a custom that after the end of tefillah, and actually this was done Yom Kippur very much, but even after a normal tefillah, the women were allowed into the main body of the shul. Here's the bimah, but in Sephardic community, al-memar. The women would come in and they would open up the Aron and they would be allowed to kiss the Sefer Torah and offer up a tefillah. Now, you look at these three Sifrei Torah, and when I was in Rome at the Jewish Museum, you're not allowed to take photographs, but my camera went off by mistake. And I've got this picture. Yes, it's Italy, but you can see, right? This is not the teak, the wooden box that you get with Sephardim. And it's not the Ashkenazi Sefer Torah Me'il that we have, but you can see the influence. Now, this is more for our Rav. This is Rabban Gamliel, and you can see this is how you keep people in order. He's got the whip with his students. They've got the book. This is a beautiful illustration in the text. And here you've got a full page text, and this is the Bet HaMikdash, right? This is where it's all going. And you've got the two pillars, Joachim and Boaz. You've got here like the Kruvim, the wings. You've got maybe the Nicanor gates. I mean, obviously the architecture is very much from the period, the 1350s, 14th century. And today I was looking at this and it hit me how I'd seen this, and I pulled this picture of the Barcelona Cathedral. And if you look up, there you have it. The artist has taken the most magnificent building that he can find, which is basically the Barcelona Cathedral. And he's incorporated those architectural features into this. And in fact, if you look at the apse, the very, very top, you've got that here. And here you've got the Aseret Dibrot, and we know inside the Aron, you've got the broken Luchot, you've got the Luchot, so it's alluding to that. So again, one could talk much more about this in the architectural, but let's carry on to the Holach Ma'anya page. where again you can see at the top the arms of the Crown of Aragon. This lasts even till today for anyone who's into football, right? The football club Barcelona. You've got the crowns of the coat of arms of Aragon. And you've got down here, the academics who go into this have said the Zantz family, a Jewish family, and this could be that this Haggadah was produced for a wedding between this family, the Zantz family, and the Shoshan, Evan Shoshan. You can see similar there. So that's basically giving us an idea, because there's no colophon, there's no page in this Haggadah which tells us where it was bought. Now, this is probably the most famous illustration, mainly because of the book, the novel, which shows the Seder table. And of course, this mystery figure, is she you can see she's got African features. Is she a servant who lived with the family, who helped, because they're on one side of the table, she's on the other? Is she someone who was converting? Is she a Muslim guest who was sitting at the table? We don't know the answers to any of these things. And you've got the various things that you'd have on a Seder table. You can see maybe with the charoset there, the wine, the matzah. But one of the things I want to draw your attention to, and again, I haven't seen this dealt with in too much depth, but I'm pretty convinced the more I think about it. This is a mosque lamp from 1385. For those from London, I have friends watching, and from London, I think David Khalili actually owns this in his collection. He was a member of our community. And you can see here the lamp. But interestingly, in the middle, you've got something closer to the Judenstern, which is much more from Europe. Now, if you're a wealthy family and you travel and you collect Judaica, you collect things, then you're going to end up, as I have hanging in my house, a Judenstern. I don't actually have a mosque lamp, I must get one. But they've got both, showing, as it were, the wider world, perhaps. And this was used, it was lowered over the table, especially by Ashkenazim. It was used in Spain in that period, but I think it's showing more than that. So there are a number of facsimiles, not so many. This is the latest one done by Shalom Sabar, and due to just, it's weird how things happen in life, he really had to produce this in very short time. And I offered to read through some of the stuff in English, and I ended up being the first English editor of the second volume, the explanatory volume. So you've got a facsimile. So I'm actually named in that as an English editor. And here they are. They're actually, this is the real Sarajevo Haggadah putting it together. So this is a poem, I think, you know, we're living in really difficult times. And this is a poem, I think, that certainly it's on my mind a lot of the time, that yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, we just don't know, but today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. It's a little bit trite, but I think going back into history and to see the trials, the tribulations of our people over the years can help us sort of get a bit of perspective on the immediate catastrophe that's hitting the world, which will pass, and we hope as soon as possible. Somebody wrote a nice take on that yesterday is relative, tomorrow is speculative, but today is electric. That's why they called it current, which I quite like. And of course, great art helps us take us out of ourselves. And sometimes people are just great art. Aaron Lampert asked me to put this in. A Van Gogh was stolen yesterday. He said it would be great if I could put it up on the screen, the real one, but I don't have it, I'm sorry. And of course, from the Sistine Chapel, we have this, which says it all, I think, in today's world. And, well, was this a Pesach of somebody else, which had to get cancelled? I don't know, they've all disappeared. And of course, we're all a bit OCD with the hand cleaning and the hand washing. And I quite like this because we're all doing Pesach cleaning at the moment. And of course, you can be creative with your matzot. And I especially like this. For those who don't eat kabrotsk, okay, 8th day. Well, you don't keep 8th day here, but maybe in the UK. So that's basically it. Thank you very much. I wish you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach and Besorot Tovot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, for another illuminating talk about the Sarajevo Illustrated Haggadah. Our other shiurim being offered this week, please see the information in the shul email. Erev Tov.
Thanks, Richard. Thank
Pleasure,
you very
David.
much.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Brilliant. We've got our copy in front of us.
I'm going to send you a comment on it. I'll send it privately.
Yeah, sure.
Delightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The pleasure. The pleasure.
Worth cancelling all those reservations for it.
Yeah.
I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Maria.
Guys, we should Zoom anyway.
Yeah,
We should.